Welcome to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm Drew's co-host, entertainment writer Jim Hill, and he and I are recording this show on Sunday, May 31st, 2020, where you have what, now 90 minutes before the curfew, is that correct?
Yeah, I got to take the dog out one more time. We're recording this on a sad day, a sad weekend, a sad week, but we're hoping that we're going to give you guys something to look forward to and something to laugh about for, 45 minutes, and that's all that we can ask for, but everybody's safe and everybody is okay, so that's the good stuff.
I guess for me the irony is yesterday afternoon to watch the SpaceX thing and to just sit there and the fact that it worked and they launched earlier today. Nancy and I were watching them hook up at the space station.
It's
and
beautiful.
that we are capable of doing this.
Yes.
And yet you look at the footage coming from all these cities around the country, and it's just one of these things where it's like, how is it we can do that, but on the ground we can be this hateful and this stupid,
Yes. Well, and Jim, you've been around for a few more years than me. Did you ever think that we would still be dealing with this? Like, as a people, you think that we would evolve?
No, that's it exactly. Though what's kind of interesting is that these are the one little bright sparks in a very dark time. Have you seen the footage from the cities where they didn't have incidents with the police, where the police actually marched with the protesters?
No, that's great.
Yeah, or they took a knee because they got what was going on here. So, I don't know. As Drew said, we got to try to make you happy.
Yes.
Everyone's upset right now. So let me tell you what I found in Target on Saturday.
Always my favorite kind of story, Jim. Go ahead.
Okay, so Nancy and I were at Target yesterday, and we're doing the social distancing. We're wearing our mask. We've just gotten more cat litter and treats for our 2 ungrateful cats.
Good.
And we are taking the shortcut through the toy aisle to get out to checkout. Mm-hmm. And I looked to my left, and it's like, are you kidding me? Here is this solid wall of Minions, The Rise of Gru toys, and it's like, oh no.
Somebody forgot to recall those.
Yeah, somebody missed the memo. And it's just, and honestly, some of the toys, like, remember how in the very first Despicable Me movie, there was the fart gun?
Yes.
Well, I'm pleased to report that given this is the rise of Gru, his early days, among the things that you can purchase in your local Target right now is a Tiny Toot. It's a fart-firing Minions blaster for role-playing. Because, again, that's what you want in a moment where we're all still sheltering in place at home. It's like, let's arm the kids with a fart gun. And,
did you get any sense of, like, what the movie was based on the toys? Like, the plot or anything?
You got one of the play sets, for example, is young Gru's lair. It can't be that big because he's only got 4 minions.
Right.
Again, I just kind of felt bad because it's like, if Universal is following the same business plan per usual, this is the first of 3 waves of merch, Drew. Because remember, this movie initially wasn't supposed to open until, the last week of June, early July?
I think, July this year, yeah.
Okay, so 6 weeks out, you get your first wave of merch. So you pre-sell that out of anticipation. Then you have your second wave of merch, which capitalizes on the actual theatrical release, followed by the third wave of merch, which is supposed to support the release on home video, the premium video on demand. And it's like, I really hope somebody can make the call to at least slow down those other 2 waves of merch.
Yeah.
On the other hand, again, this is just how the business is. These things were ordered years ago. They've probably been on the slow boat from China since January, February, just as things were getting disrupted. So it's not like they could put a halt to them.
Right. Listen, we all have seen the ugly Sonic merchandise on the stores. We know how long this stuff takes to fix. So,
well, now, speaking of Sonic, I don't think I was honestly surprised that there was a sequel in the works, but what was your take on this?
Well, did you ever see it, Jim? Did you watch Sonic?
It again, it's on that ever increasing pile of things that I actually have to sit down and watch. In fact, later in the show, we'll be talking about the new Looney Tunes at HBO Max, which I'm getting to tonight after we record this podcast. And likewise, Central Park, which I was listening to the soundtrack in the car and I thought was wonderful and got to see a couple of clips associated with it. But, it just,
there's so much, Jim. I know. Even when you can't do anything, you're still far behind. Fall behind. It's crazy.
Story of my life. All right. So anyway, So you liked
I liked it. Yeah, I did. I thought it was fun. But I mean, it very clearly sets up a sequel at the end of the movie with the introduction of Tails.
Okay.
I think he's a squirrel or something. Maybe he's a fox. He's a fox.
Okay.
So Tails is introduced. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't hugely expensive to make. It made a bunch of money. It's a family movie. I think it's sort of their Jumanji almost, like a very reliable family franchise. Paramount doesn't have a lot of franchises to sort of build on, so this seemed like a foregone conclusion, but it's nice that it's official and people are getting paid and working and all that stuff that is not happening that much these days.
No.
In Hollywood.
We're always happy when somebody in animation is getting a check. In fact, what's been kind of interesting, I can't reveal who has just been hired, but they're staffing up for Space Jam Legacy. They're kind of in that situation where, because nobody can actually come to the studio, they're hiring some very talented veteran animators to basically work from home on the Looney Tunes characters. So it'll be interesting to see how that film turns out next year, right? That's when we're due to get...
Yeah.
Okay.
We're supposed to. Yeah, I mean, I can draw a pretty good Marvin the Martian, so maybe... I'm available, Jim. That's all I'm saying. I'm available.
Okay, I'll put in a word. Okay, now...
Yeah.
Now, speaking of well-drawn, I've seen the one sort of sample episode that's out there for the new Looney Tunes show, but you're through about half of them now, you were saying, right?
Yeah, they're really good. There's 10 up right now, and I think they're about 11 minutes each, and it's a nice combination of, it'll be like a Bugs Bunny cartoon and then a Tweety cartoon, or there'll be different sort of combinations, a Roadrunner cartoon and a Yosemite Sam cartoon or whatever, and the animation is really wonderful. The voice work is pretty uniformly excellent, and they sort of reinvent the characters. I think the sort of playbook that they're basing this on is the Mickey Mouse shorts, which you and I adore.
Yep.
I know that some people have varying opinions on it, but I think it's great. We both love it. So. Yeah, it's really, really special, and I can't wait for you to start your free trial tonight and just watch them all in one big lump.
My Sunday night is shaping up to binging, the Looney Tunes show, and then step right into Rick and Morty. So it's like,
I know it's always a challenge to stay up until 11:30 on a Sunday night, but Rick and Morty is worth it.
No, it is. It just seems like, especially the second half of this season, it's Rick and Morty. Literally, it's I dare you to like us. I dare you. Just sort of like, the writing has been so strong and so good, but at the same time, they keep walking out these ideas that are so, antithetical to entertainment. I don't know. Really appreciate what they're doing there.
Listen, Jim, if the two main characters can conclude an episode by pooping their pants, I'm there for it, Jim. I'm absolutely there for it.
And that's entertainment, folks. Okay. Now, all right. Are the news items, other show coming back?
Yes.
Fraggles.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, am I allowed to say that I appreciated the Fraggles? I wasn't necessarily entertained by the Fraggles back in the day. I mean, I
Really? Well, Jim, you were also not... Let's see, what is the word I'm looking for? A child in the early 80s.
Mentally, yes, okay. And,
yes.
But, if you drill down into the Henson story, Fraggles was really about Jim trying to, we have to take care of the planet. We have to be better to, well, actually, actually today, maybe that we have to be nicer to one another. It's like, wow, why does that message suddenly resonate? But that's the thing. those of us who got in on the ground floor with the Muppets, virtually every skit they did ended with either an explosion or another Muppet eating, another Muppet on stage. It was chaos. There was anarchy. And the thing of Fraggles is they're nice. They're very nice. There's a talking trash heap.
Right.
I got to the point where I was waiting for the Gorges to show up. It's like, okay, when did the stupid people get here and do fun things? So,
well, I think there is an aspect of Fraggle Rock that you do love, right? Which is the two characters that Jim played, Cantus and Honest John.
Okay.
And how those sort of reflected the two halves of his personality in a lot of ways. The kind of showbiz hustler and also the very kind of serene, spiritual hippie type guy.
That's an excellent insight. You're right. Yeah.
I think that's an element that you can appreciate. And also the song Cantus Does is one of the best songs that was ever sung by Jim. But I growing up, this is showing my age, but growing up with the Fraggles, I'm very excited to have them back. And Apple Plus has all of the old shows now. Even though they said we're not gonna just buy up libraries, all of those shows are now on Apple TV Plus. So that's cool.
Okay.
If you want to go back and watch it. I'm a big Uncle. You're not an Uncle Traveling Matt fan?
Oh, okay. I see. Now you're reminding me. Now I want to go watch it.
No, you're right. But it is a very gentle.
Yeah.
And
again, I just needed a little Stadler and Waldorf in there. Heck. So, all right. Anyway,
you can do that yourself at home. You can be
This is true. This is true. And speaking of show business hustling, we've talked about this on a couple of recent episodes of Fine Tuning, but Drew and I had so been enjoying that Kevin Lima was putting out concept art from Monkeys of Mumbai, the DreamWorks animation feature that effectively got cut off at the knees by, the $4 billion acquisition of DreamWorks Animation by NBC Universal. And so it was so nice to get to see what this film, was potentially going to look like. Just recently, we got some test animation, which really sort of nailed home that there was honestly a movie here, and it had spectacular design and that sort of thing. And then, as I think you and I both feared, Drew, the lawyers found out about this.
Yes.
So can you talk about what just happened, or?
Yeah, I mean, basically, somebody from Universal put a cease and desist on Kevin Lima's, sharing of this production artwork. And what's interesting is the tweets are still there, but they just stripped out all the animation and all the images. So you'll see his thoughts, and you can actually still read about the story, but all of the drawings, renderings, I mean, some of it was pretty finished. That animation of them swinging on the telephone wires.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It was so beautiful, and it was so close to being done and being put into a movie. But
did you see any of that they had a brief chunk of the villain? I mean, it switched back and forth from
that was
boards.
so cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it just, I don't know, it kind of breaks my heart that we live in a world now where there are other options. There are, the Netflix of the world where you can do a Klaus or a Willoughby's or that sort of thing. And we've just seen Popeye come back from the dead. There was a part of me that really hoped that Kevin's Hail Mary here was going to get attention from somebody and maybe finally get this movie made. But
listen, Jim, nobody's going to watch Peacock unless we get Monkeys of Mumbai on there.
There you go. All right. What else? What else we got? I know you're a Wallace and Gromit fan.
Yes.
What did you make of this Aardman thing? Well, again, it was just sort of a commercial teaser trailer.
Yeah.
Kind of
Did you understand what this thing is exactly?
The Big Fix Up. So
yes.
It's a game?
It's an augmented reality app, which makes me think of something like Pokemon Go. Or something, but the description of it is really insane. It says it will harness various media, including multi-user AR gameplay, in-character phone calls, comic strips, extended reality portals, and more. And the story is that they've hired Wallace and Gromit to fix Bristol, which is where Aardman Animation is located. And it's the first time that you're going to see them in CGI, which is really interesting. But it seems like a huge project. It says that it's a joint initiative from Aardman Animations and Fictioneers, a collaboration between 3 British digital media companies, Potato, Sugar Creative, and Tiny Rebel Games. And also the University of South Wales is providing research support. And the project is backed by a multi-million-dollar grant from the public body Innovate UK. So
I guess for me, my only problem here is the consistent message of every Wallace and Gromit film I've ever seen is that the more technology gets involved in something, the worse the outcome.
That's true. That's true.
To me, this actually sounds like the premise of a Wallace and Gromit movie.
Yes.
We're going to make this highly involved, amazingly complex machine. And then at the end, we're going to watch Wallace and Gromit frantically running from the teeth of this thing, almost being consumed. And
right.
so to hear that it's this technically involved, it's like, oh, this is going to end well. I'm sure it'll be fine. But,
hopefully that element will be in the gameplay, though. That would be fun. Like, things going haywire and whatnot. So...
yeah.
I just love it. I love them so much, Jim.
No. Same thing here. I'm always glad to see Wallace and Gromit back. And in fact, this makes me want to go watch Curse of the Were-Rabbit or the Wrong Trousers again. But it was just so nice to see them.
Yes.
But at the same time, I have told you my story about when Disney was going to be remaking Journey into Imagination.
Yes, but I don't know if everybody else knows this story, so why don't you share it with us, Jim?
Okay, so I have a good friend, Justin Jorgensen, who was working at Imagineering back in the late 90s. And during that period was when the contract initially lapsed for Kodak. And this is the point where Kodak is spinning in because film is being replaced by digital cameras and that sort of thing. And so the folks back in Rochester were like, look, we don't have the money to do a big redo of this attraction. And Disney's like, well, hang on, let's talk. And it's the whole notion of, okay, so if we don't have a lot of money to necessarily upgrade and improve the attraction, what else can we do? Well, we can bring in a celebrity host. And it's like, what? It's like, well, yeah, I mean, we've got Dreamfinder, we've got Figment, but, they've been there a while, and maybe it's time to replace them. So the people who are in charge of Imagination will, well, who could we get? And so, well, hang on, let me get you the list. It's like, we have a list? And it's like, yeah, we've cut deals with various folks. These are the people who Disney is currently looking for projects to give them homes.
Right.
Justin calls me one day and it's like, you're not going to believe this. We're considering a host for the Imagination Pavilion. Well, who? And it's like, well, right now we're staring at 2 choices. One is Michael Jordan. And the idea was that the setup for the attraction is basically you would be digitally inserted into Michael Jordan's imagination and watch his thinking process. But the other characters that Disney had just gotten the theme park rights to were Wallace and Gromit. That's the one that's always intrigued me because, face it, people are still angry about the Dreamfinder being taken out of Journey into Imagination. But if they replaced Dreamfinder and Figment with Wallace and Gromit, that could have been cool.
That could have been really cool. I remember when Disney was making sort of overtures to Aardman as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I told this story before, but when I was taking a stop motion class at the Disney Institute, RIP. And my instructor said, oh, yeah, Nick Park was through here like last week. And they were trying to sell him on all the stuff that Disney could do for Aardman, which was really interesting to me, especially that even as a kid, I was obsessed with Wallace and Gromit. So it was very close to happening at one point. It's interesting that they had the theme park rights and never did anything with them.
Wow, that is intriguing. All right, one final Nick Park story.
Yes.
Okay, the folks at DreamWorks have been nice enough when Curse of the Were-Rabbit was about to be released at theater. So Nick is doing his standard, they're doing the press tour. So they bring him out to Boston. And, you know the drill, Drew. You get your 10 or 15 minutes in the tiny little room with the person and you put down your digital recorder. And so, but Nancy's a huge fan of the Wallace and Gromit films. And so we go into the tiny room and here's Nick Park with Wallace and Gromit, the plasticine figures of Wallace and Gromit on the table. And so I begin to interview Nick, but Nancy's sitting there next to me. And, at one point, she's, oh, they're so cute, and goes to reach for them. And Nick's, literally picks them and moves them closer to him. It's like, you can't touch those, and Nancy left a little bit crushed because she was that close to Wallace and Gromit and couldn't touch them. Now, the very next day, in fact, you folks probably remember the story. Nick is down in New York finishing up the press tour and takes a cab over to the venue, but he's got Wallace and Gromit with him in a brown paper bag. Gets out of the venue, walks in, goes upstairs, and goes, oh my God, I left Wallace and Gromit in the cab. And I want to say it took a day or two before they finally got returned. But Nancy was like, well, he won't let me touch them, but he leaves them behind in the cab. It's like, that's kind of a bone of contention for many years here at the house. But I think through years and years of therapy, Nancy's finally put it behind her.
That's interesting that they were doing that because for the last movie, Early Man, a movie that you and I both already forgotten about completely. But they had actually set up sets in the Beverly Hills Four Seasons. And as I was talking to him, we were walking around these giant sets with giant puppets and everything. It was so cool. It was like you were in that. Yeah, it was really, really neat. And Nick was, Nick is like the most lovely human being ever.
Except when he doesn't let you touch Wallace.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway,
not to Nancy, but everybody else. Wow.
Well, it's not like we're saying Nick is a monster. And speaking of monsters, when we get back, Drew and I are going to talk about an animated monster movie that almost got made by Universal.
This episode is brought to you by Marqeta. When it comes to your payments provider, you can't afford to compromise. Marqeta's modern payment solutions flex with your business without the trade-offs. Stable and agile, secure and innovative, scalable and configurable. If they say you can't have it all, don't believe them. Your business demands more. Choose a payments provider that delivers more. Choose Marqeta. Visit marqeta.com/Spotify to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Battlefield 6. Battlefield 6 is the ultimate all-out warfare experience. Rip through the skies in aerial dogfights. Demolish your surroundings for a strategic advantage. Harness complete control over every action and movement using the kinesthetic combat system. Drop into multiplayer with your squad, or fight furiously as a member of the Dagger 1-3 squad in a gritty, adrenaline-fueled single-player campaign where you'll defend a world on the edge of collapse.
Now, I have to say, Drew suggested the topic for today's feature, and it comes on the heels of this wonderful news story that Drew has written for Collider. It's basically exhaustive report on,
hopefully not exhausting.
It's wonderfully entertaining, but it's the 45 high points of Industrial Light and Magic in honor of the 45th anniversary of the launch.
Yes.
And I got to say, I don't want to pile too much praise on here, but it's damn near definitive. But at the same time, when I say exhausting, all I can think of is you had to watch all 45 of these movies to sort of...
Well, I kind of like cherry-picked what I rewatched, but, it's hard because they've done so much, and they've done so many different types of movies, and you didn't want it just to be all Star Wars stuff. Yeah, it's sort of like the 45 most unforgettable moments for ILM. So even if the movie sucks, like I had the ejector seat sequence from Die Hard 2 in there, just because it is so iconic. Jim, you remember this being in every trailer, every TV spot, every pay-per-view advertisement, everything. And it's just, so ingrained. But what were you going to say?
Well, no, what's so funny is you're right. That's great effects work. But then do you remember the match shot at the end of the movie? That genuinely terrible shot of it's
with all the planes on the tarmac.
Care to guess which visual effects house painted that mat?
Was that Dream Quest?
Yeah, that was the folks at Disney.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. I looked at that and it's like, this is Disney. Disney, the king of matte. Think about it. For the very first ILM movie or the very first Star Wars movie, they actually hired Harrison Ellenshaw, who just made the appearance for Tron on Prop Culture.
Oh my God. How amazing was that matte shot? I never even thought about that being a matte shot. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah. But that was the thing. You had other studios seeking out Disney to do matte shots. And here we are, jump ahead just 10 or 15 years after that. And it's like, this is the type of stuff you do. A 4-year-old with crayon could have created more, believable planes. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm being mean here. But anyway, it's a wonderful article, well worth seeking out. But you mentioned that, as you were trying to figure out which of the 45, there were things you had to cut. And among them, well, obviously, you can't talk about the Frankenstein movie that ILM made because they never made it.
Yes.
But at the same time, you can go online right now, folks, to YouTube and see the 17-second long test that Universal had commissioned, to sort of sell the board on the notion of this is what we should be doing. Well, I guess we need to tell the story right. Face it, just in the past week, we saw the announcement of the Ryan Gosling werewolf movie.
Yes.
Okay. And you and I both know over the past 20 years or so, we have seen numerous attempts to relaunch the classic Universal monsters. We've had, Dracula Untold with Luke Evans back in 2014, and The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro.
Still going to therapy for that one, Jim. Yep.
But that's the thing. That's Joe Johnston.
Yes.
Now, mind you,
but that was him. He came in at the last minute.
That's it exactly. That was literally a rescue mission, and he did what he could. And let's not forget about Van Helsing back in 2004. Intriguingly enough, there were also attempts in the same period to get a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie going. And
yeah.
Did you see, though, that for a time, Guillermo del Toro was the guy assigned to do that?
Yes,
and
amongst many others.
Well, I know. I love Guillermo. In fact, let's be honest here. He did get to make his Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, Shape of Water. But not to deliberately pass it by, but we did get The Mummy with Tom Cruise back in 2017, which we'll discuss later in today's show.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is that Universal had recognized they had this whole body of films from the 30s and the 40s that had made huge money for the studios, and there was still tremendous interest from the public, but they could never get it relaunched the way they wanted. And then Toy Story comes out in 1995. And it's kind of nuts to talk about this now, but you got to remember that there was some hesitation about doing a full-length animated film in CG because it was like, will people watch this for an hour and a half? Didn't we answer that question back in the 30s with Snow White? But, but there were still executives like, wow, it looks hard. It looks, lots of shapes. I don't know if people will go for this. But Universal, on the other hand, is looking at the amount of money that Toy Story made. And, here's DreamWorks. They get their own. Which of the companies did they buy again?
Pacific Data Images.
There we go.
Yes.
PDI.
Yeah.
And they get Ants going. And meanwhile, of course, Pixar is working on the follow-up to Toy Story, A Bug's Life. And here's Universal. And it's like, wow, this opens up a whole room full of possibilities. And so they reach out to ILM. And what's kind of interesting about this moment is that ILM has really staffed up for Phantom Menace. And the fear evidently in-house is that they have all of these truly talented people, who are working on the various, the Gungans and the droid battle and all that. But there's going to be a 2-year lag, at least between episode 1 coming out in theaters and then between the shooting, they won't have the footage to begin the work on the sequel, Attack of the Clones, for 2 years. And it's like, well, what are we going to do with these people? We need a project to work on it. Here comes Universal through the door, and it's like, hey, how would you guys feel about doing a CG version of Frankenstein? And not just any version of Frankenstein. What they wanted to try to do was create something that would match the exact look, style, and tone of James Whale's, the 2 James Whale movies, the 31 original Frankenstein and then Bride of Frankenstein from 35. And so that's where we get this 17-second long test, which, by the way, I'm told, Drew, that while the version that's online is black and white, obviously aping the look of the two James Whale films, it was rendered in color.
Oh, really?
Yeah, supposedly because executives at Universal just couldn't decide which was the smarter play here. Do they go with the classic look, the black and white, because, the rest of the film's really going to ape the look of the James Whale movie? Or, because there was always that fear that kids won't go to a black and white movie. And speaking of kids, well, all right, you were the one who pointed out the screenwriters they hired for these.
Yeah.
These were the guys who had done Tremors for Universal, right?
Yeah, Brent Maddock and S.S. Wilson, who were pretty hot in the sort of 80s, early 90s. They did Short Circuit and Batteries Not Included and Heart and Soul, which is a movie that I really like that Robert Downey Jr. was in. No.
Yeah, the bus crash.
Yes, yes.
No. That's a very enjoyable, and you're right. They were very hot, and the notion was that Universal wanted this film that could hit a sweet spot. It could be a horror film, but a family-friendly horror film.
Yeah, it seems like they were kind of ahead of the curve in that respect too, right? With like Monster House, all the Hotel Transylvania movies. It's like they were sort of ahead of the curve, I think, in a lot of ways in terms of approaching this.
Absolutely. In fact, Maddock, in an interview with Variety, said, Universal wants something new in animation. They want a fairly dark, edgy cartoon that will be genuinely scary, and that was what attracted us. How scary can a cartoon be? We're going to find out. It must have a real gothic sensibility. We don't want to be dismissed as uncool by a 12-year-old boy, but we want an 8-year-old boy to be able to see this. It's got to be scary. And again,
how many decisions in entertainment in the 90s were made by 8-year-old boys? Whether it's Breck Eisner, who later was going to do a Creature from the Black Lagoon for Universal.
He was.
Like everyone's worried about what the 8-year-old boy is going to do. It's just fascinating to me.
Well, they're the ones who, Mom, can we go? Mom, can we go? Mom. But anyway, again, Casey Silver, the chairman of Universal Pictures, he's the guy who set this whole thing in motion. He flat out said, look, we felt it would be tough to compete with Disney in the animation business, but with computer-generated movies, it's more of a level playing field. Okay, so here's the problem. It's an $80 million movie in 1998 money. And again, as I mentioned, they can't decide black and white, color. But on the other hand, when Casey gets to see this 17-second long test, ILM delivers it, and Casey says, when I saw that test, I knew the time was right to see Frankenstein again. Anyway, as for the story, it was supposed to basically be a direct sequel to Bride of Frankenstein.
There were other Frankenstein movies, though.
It's probably been a while since you've seen this film. That's the one that ends with, after the bride rejects the monster, he grabs a lever inside of Frankenstein's lab and says, "We belong dead." Pulls a lever, and then the miniature of the tower blows up.
Right.
And you may remember there was a weird former mentor of Dr. Frankenstein, Dr. Pretorius, who was helping him out with making The Bride. Anyway, as the new film, and it's called Frankenstein and the Wolfman for some reason.
Right.
Wolfman's supposed to play, a minor role in this thing, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that was the actual title, but that's what the test footage was labeled, I think, and that's why people think that was the title.
Okay, so Dr. Pretorius somehow survives the explosion. He's got Henry Frankenstein's notebook, and he wants to continue the experiments that Frankenstein was doing. The problem is, in order to do this, he needs one of the neck bolts, the things that was zapped by lightning that brought Frankenstein monsters to life. And so he pays to have the wreckage of the tower unearthed, and there's no monster there. And he figures, okay, the monster is loose somewhere in the countryside, and that's how the film starts. Pretorius is trying to chase down the monster. Interesting thing, I came across that Casey, in order to get this thing some star power early on, he persuaded David Bowie to come be the voice of Dr. Pretorius.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Speaking of Bowie, back in the news lately, because we just had the announcement, we were just talking Fraggles. Now we have the Labyrinth sequel.
Yeah. I've heard a little bit about this from some friends at Henson, so I should watch what I say, but yeah, I think it's going to be really fun and interesting, this new take. Yeah.
Are we seeing Jareth the Goblin King again?
I think this time we're seeing a Goblin Queen, Jim. So be on the lookout for who they're going to cast for that. Could it be a returning character, perhaps? Who knows, Jim? What I'm saying is we just don't know, and I'm not going to put it out there. So
Wow, okay. Professional teases by Drew Taylor. Okay. All right. Getting back to S.S. Wilson, one of the screenwriters here. Face it, making a CG film in the style of original Frankenstein was going to be a challenge. But, as he pointed out, it's like, this is 1998. This is the year the Titanic comes out. James Cameron sank a ship and killed 1,500 people, all in CG. So as S.S. Wilson says, look, it's a leap of faith at this point. Kind of Jim Cameron saying you can put 1,500 people on the Titanic and make it look realistic. If you're going to be doing a movie with monsters in it and want it to be scary, they got to look right. And Jim Morris, the president of Lucas Digital, that's the other thing. This was groundbreaking. This was going to be ILM's first fully digital feature. And he admitted, look, I didn't immediately see how we're going to turn this property into a computer graphic film, but a lot of artists got a hold of it and turned it into some pretty neat work, and now I'm excited. So spring of 1998, the 17-second long test, Lucasfilm premieres it at SIGGRAPH 1998, which was held in Orlando that year at the Orange County Convention Center. They were actually looking, here's the irony. They supposedly agreed to make this movie for Universal because they were looking to hang on to as many artists as possible between when Phantom Menace was being made and when Attack of the Clones was being made.
Okay.
But they then stared down the barrel of, wow, we're going to need some of the best people in the business to do this. So they were actually at SIGGRAPH recruiting people to come work on Frankenstein. And October of this year, we finally get the official stories leaking out to the trades and talking about how here's Universal spending $80 million to revive a 70-year-old film franchise. Huge roll of the dice, but they get Dave Carson, who's a superstar ILM, been working in effects there for 20 years at this point. He's going to co-direct with Brent Maddock. So, you've got the writer and you got a guy who really knows effects, and it looks like all the pieces have come together and they've got the studio behind them. And then in November of 1998, Casey Silver, a guy who's been championing this right from the get-go, is let go by Universal. And that's supposedly because another very expensive to make effects-filled film, Babe, Pig in the City, crashed and burned at the box office in November. I guess they spent $90 million to make it, and worldwide it only sold like $69 million worth of tickets. So
great movie, though. Great movie.
It is. George Miller, you can't really go wrong. But anyway, all right, so now Frankenstein continues to chug along because, a lot of talented people on board, and it had a little bit of momentum. But now Bug's Life comes out, and the execs who followed Casey into the corner suite are like, well, animation is for kids, right? Shouldn't this Frankenstein movie be less scary or at least funnier? And eventually what happens is Frankenstein gets tabled and Universal then pivots to a more family-friendly property as their first CG film. And that's going to be Curious George with a script by Brad Bird. Have you ever heard of this, Drew?
I've heard of it. I've never read it. Do you have the script on hand by any chance, Jim?
No. The thing is, it took another 7 years for Curious George to finally get made. And I've got a script for like 3 scripts past when Brad did it. And it's still on its way to, I think at this point, it's about to become a hand-drawn film as opposed to a CG film. And it has this weird conceit that whenever the man in the yellow hat, you see the world normally, but when you go to Curious George vision, the buildings dance and the cars have smiling faces. And it's, that's the thing. The entire script is like, and then the way George sees it. But I don't know. To get back to Frankenstein now, it was such an ambitious project. 2,000 plus shots. Gary Rydstrom had agreed to do the sound for the thing and was trying to reproduce how the classic Universal horror movie monsters sounded. Likewise, Danny Elfman was on board to do the score. But the thing, again, this is kind of classic Hollywood, the way it all worked out here. as soon as the ILM version of Frankenstein kind of fell by the wayside, Universal was like, well, we spent all this money working on a new Frankenstein movie. We got to do something. And so they hand the property over to Universal Cartoon Studios, which then gets in bed with Bagdasarian Productions, which is how in September of 1999 we end up with Alvin and the Chipmunks meet Frankenstein.
Wow.
Did well enough, in the home video market that the August of 2000 we got Alvin and the Chipmunks meet the Wolfman.
Well, and at the same time, in May of 99, The Mummy with Brendan Fraser came out. And I think in 2001, Mummy Returns came out. So
yeah,
clearly they were thinking about the monsters at Universal, but they just couldn't commit. And, ILM did the effects for the Mummy movies. So.
They did. In fact, it's part of your 45 years and 45 top illusions. You talk about the face in the sand.
Yes. I love that moment. It's so good.
Yeah. And speaking of the Mummy, I feel like we have to go back and touch on the 2017 Mummy because we're...
Must we, Jim? Must we?
Well, remember, that was supposed to be the first film of Dark Universe, which was going to be Universal's answer to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And, I just recently rewatched it. Again, I have to say, none of this is Tom Cruise's fault.
No, not at all. Yeah, but
you watched him in that movie. I don't think any human being has worked harder to try to entertain an audience in a movie in the history of Hollywood.
It's true. He's naked. He's fighting Russell Crowe. He's in zero gravity, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how hard he works to try to entertain people. But that film, just for some reason, it has amazing effects and wonderful sets, but it's just... inert. It just never catches fire.
No. But you're right. They have been showing it on FX movies every other day, I think, throughout this quarantine. Maybe as a sociological experiment to see how many people are driven mad by the Mummy. I don't know.
But seriously, I watched that. It feels like he works harder than he ever worked in any of the Mission Impossible movies. And he can't close the gap. He can't make it work. And... God, that must have been so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, he does what he can.
Okay. Speaking of Mission Impossible, you're still coming off of that 100th episode, right?
We're riding high, Jim, from that 100th episode. But we have not, much like Tom Cruise, we are relentless in our attempts to entertain people. Mm-hmm. A couple weeks ago, we had Ron Moore, who created Battlestar Galactica, on the show. He wrote an initial draft for Mission Impossible 2. This week, the week that this airs, we'll have the second part of our Mitchell Lieb episode, which you really should listen to, Jim, because he's a legend at Disney. He runs Walt Disney Records.
Soundtrack, yes.
So he tells this great story. And in our second episode, we talk about Daft Punk, and we break some news about Jungle Cruise, which I'm sure we'll swing around on. And so after that, we've got many people that are mentioned in this article, Jim. We've got Gary Rydstrom coming on. We've got Roger Guyette from ILM, who's done amazing visual effects for a number of movies. And so the hits will keep on coming, Jim, I promise.
Light the Fuse has been a must-listen-to podcast for a while now, but it's just crazy. It seems like just as you get things going well, then you guys move it to a whole different level. So, if you're not listening to this, folks, so you really should. And speaking of stuff you could listen to, here at the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, we got Disney Dish with Len Testa. We got Looking at Lucasfilm with Dan Z. We got Marvelous Disney, the Marvel theme podcast they do with Aaron Adams, the gentleman who does a lot of editing here. We have Universal Joint with Dustin Fuse, and I kind of feel bad because we just did a Universal story, but we'll have another episode of that out shortly.
There's no mummies running around the theme park, Jim. It's all right. We're church and state.
well, there you go. And I Want That, which I do with Michelle Valladolid, and that one got a little easier to do. What with the World of Disney finally opening up. Did you see that went from like a 6-hour line to no line because you now had to book through the app, an appointment to get into the store?
I really want that Pleasure Island hat, Jim, if we have any Orlando listeners. That's it.
Well, okay. You've heard it, folks. Show your appreciation, Mr. Taylor. Get him a hat.
Yes.
Okay. And tell you what, if you want to also show your appreciation for Mr. Taylor and myself, if you could head over to iTunes and rate and recommend not only Light the Fuse, but also Fine Tuning. If you really, really like what you heard here tonight, If you get over to Bandcamp and subscribe, that would be helpful. And again, social media wise, if you enjoy watching Disney bloggers get beaten up, where can they find you, Drew?
Drew Taylor, Tailored. I wasn't beating anybody up, Jim. I was just calling somebody out, and then I got a lot of camaraderie out of it. Actually, I think brought us all together, Jim, because there's just one bad apple. That's okay. That's all right.
I stand corrected. Okay, that's Twitter and Instagram, or?
Yes, Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn if you want to give me a job. I'm also available for that. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, whatever you got.
He's a busy guy. Okay, Jim Hill Media-wise, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And I think that will do it for this week, folks. So thanks for listening, and Drew and I will be back soon with a variety of shows.